Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that Labor and the Greens, together with a handful of smaller Liberals, have shot down a request by Senator Alex Antic to refer his bill to a Senate hearing. This is the Childhood Gender Transition Prohibition Bill, seeking to ban gender reassignment treatment and surgery for children. That inspired this rather emotional rant from the Greens' Nick McKim.
Bunch of right-wing transphobes. That is exactly what Senator Antic and I'm sure Senator Roberts, extremist fascists who are transphobes. We are not going to facilitate providing parliamentary privilege to that kind of people. If the hat fits, Senator O'Sullivan can put it on if he wants to.
Senator
if the hat
McKim, resume your
fits,
seat.
I withdraw that comment.
Liberal Senator Alex Antic joins me now. Now, what you were seeking to do here, Senator, was to refer your bill to a Senate hearing where both sides could make their case. Why is that inspiring so much opposition?
Well, that's a great question, Rita, and I don't know the answer to that, except to say that all we were asking for, really, all I was asking for here was for this bill to be referred off to a hearing. Really, it's just getting evidence before the Senate. So that would include getting those that are for this treatment and those that are against this treatment in. But somehow that elicited a fairly animated response. And I do wonder, I mean, I think what we're seeing here is, this sort of almost closed book approach to this. There is only one answer, and it must be to have surgery and puberty-blocking drugs for kids when they exhibit these symptoms. And there are many people in our community that share a very different view. One of the great ways to get a bill right, because ultimately I hope this bill will hit the parliament floor, but one of the best ways this system gets it right and irons out the kinks is by hearing evidence from both sides. So it really was no more or less than that. Unfortunately, though, Labor and the Greens conspired to shut it down. They don't even want a hearing. They don't want people coming in and telling their stories, which I think is absolutely lamentable.
Now, the Greens and Labor, they were predictable in blocking this request, but there were also a small number of Liberals who did not back you, who voted with the Greens or abstained, including Simon Birmingham, we had Dean Smith, Jane Hume, quite a few others. How can the coalition still have MPs who do not want to see this issue even reviewed? We've seen it reviewed in the UK, in Scandinavia and elsewhere. And it's very much a necessary measure to ensure that children aren't being harmed.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's right. This was simply a referral, I mean, into a committee for hearing. I don't know why that would be so controversial. I don't think it's controversial at all. It's probably a question best put to Simon Birmingham. Simon is the leader of the Senate here and I think makes the decision as to whether or not these are taken as conscience motions. I don't think they should be conscience motions. I think they're open and shut, and I think this should have been referred off, and I think we should have had every member of the coalition supporting them, frankly. But that's a matter. These are the great things about this party, is it does allow conscience votes and it does allow people to vote with their conscience or to abstain from voting. So that's a matter for them.
Senator Antic, the conscience vote is supposed to be a rare thing. It shouldn't be every other week, which it appears to be the case these days. It should be maybe once in your parliamentary career there's a conscience vote. But now it seems to be a routine matter, and I think it only weakens the coalition and confuses the electorate to what you actually stand for. But moving on to other matters, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton, got into a heated argument in Parliament this week over the state of anti-Semitism in this country. Let's have a look.
This Prime Minister needs to stand up and to be united with the Jewish community, and he's not.
I make no apologies for standing up against anti-Semitism, and I will do it unequivocally. But I also have a track record of standing up for the rights and for justice of Palestinian people. And I make no apologies for being a consistent supporter of a two-state solution.
We saw the Sydney Morning Herald's David Crowe slamming Peter Dutton's speech as a cheap ploy for political gain and an ugly fight we don't need in these anxious times. What's your reaction to some of the commentary from the political pundits and also the Prime Minister's performance in this area?
Well, I mean, I try not to listen to too many of the political pundits because most of them, don't really get it right. And I think that's the case here. I have to say that in this case, what do people want? We've been saying, those of us that know Peter well, that this guy is a man of integrity and he is someone that will lay a punch when the need comes. And we've seen that this week. I mean, if ever there was a call for the adults in the room to rise up when the degraders are in charge of the ship, this was it. And Peter took the reins this week and landed more blows in about 25 minutes with this bill and the corrections being made to it than this government's laid in its entire term. It's been a very, very bad month for this government, dating back to The Voice, but then throwing in the confusion about what the message is about the Gaza conflict. And then on top of that, this immigration debacle this week. I think what we have to see here is the Australian people are starting to get a taste for what they voted for, and there are a lot of people driving around with don't blame me, I voted Liberal stickers on their cars at the moment. I can tell you they're going to get more popular as the days go on.
Now, we did see Labor do a major backflip yesterday. They completely capitulated to Peter Dutton and the Coalition's amendments to the emergency legislation in response to the High Court decision that's seen criminals, rapists, murderers released into the community. What do you make of that legislation? Is that enough? And what can we do long term to ensure that we can secure our borders and also ensure people who are not fit to be in the community are in detention?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems in one way or another, every time Labor get the keys to the building here, we see an immigration crisis, whether or not it's allowing porous borders through the boats, as we saw back in the sort of the 2007 era, or with this now. It's just in Labor's DNA to get this all wrong. This bill, we have to understand, was something that really was signalled months and months ago. There was every chance that we were going to get to this point, depending on what the High Court said. The opportunity was there to come up with a better fix than we got much, much earlier, and that opportunity wasn't taken. So it was taken to Peter Dutton and his team to actually save the furniture on this. As to what could be done, well, that's a longer stretch question. There are potentially powers using the various terrorism powers that might be used, and there is the possibility of broader, far-reaching reforms that are made. But part of the problem here was that this bill was slammed on the desk of this side of the fence at 7:15 a.m. and Peter and his team were given about 25 minutes to an hour in order to work out what the position was. So this sort of holding the fort position that's been put through, which, by the way, had to be patched up by us, is the best we're going to do in the short term. And look, I think it needs a greater scrutiny. We cannot have a situation where violent criminals, rapists, sex offenders and others are being released into the community. This is just a fundamental basic no.
Absolutely. Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Rita.